Shabbat Shalom, and this is 10 minutes of Torah. Actually, this is really 10 minutes of Sukkot, because what I want to talk to you about is exactly where I am sitting right now, and that is the Sukkah. Now I'm going to show you a bit of my Sukkah. Here you see there's some of the decorations. There's the wall. Oh, I even have a window in my wall. There's the roof, the schach, with lights. If you're thinking those lights look an awful lot like Christmas lights, you would be both right and wrong, and I'll explain. So the lights in my sukkah actually come, believe it or not, from my daughter Tamar's bat mitzvah. And yet they are in the same style as Christmas lights. And what's fascinating is that if you go to Israel and you go to the most ultra-Orthodox parts of Jerusalem and you look at the lights that are for sale for Sukkot, they don't just look like Christmas lights, they are Christmas lights. But the ultra-Orthodox who are purchasing them do not realize it. It says Christmas lights in English. But as far as they are concerned, they just make beautiful ways to light up their Sukkah. So the holiday of Sukkot is a really interesting and fascinating and ancient holiday. And Christmas lights or not, I want to discuss about some of the laws of the Sukkah. Now, I took you on a brief tour, but I'm going to take you on another tour here because you see, that's wall number 1 of my Sukkah. Wall number 2, bring you around here. Wall number 3. And what is this? There is no wall number 4. Now you might ask, wait a second, doesn't a house need 4 walls? And the answer is, a house needs 4 walls, but not a sukkah. And of course, since we are in the age of the coronavirus, if you were to indeed put up 4 walls in your sukkah, it would count as an indoor space. But you leave one wall completely down and even part of another wall, you open it up enough for it to count as being outside. But what does Jewish law say about the walls of the sukkah and also about the roof, the schach? So let's start with the walls. According to halakha, a sukkah does not need 4 walls. A sukkah needs 3 walls to identify it as a sukkah. But not only that, wall number 3 does not need to be a complete wall. It can be a partial wall, a third even of a wall, and it still counts as a kosher sukkah. And that is because it has enough of a shape of a sukkah, and at the same time it is open to nature, which is really a part of sitting in the sukkah. So a sukkah does not need 4 walls. It doesn't even need 3 full walls. It needs about 2 1/3 walls, which, as I mentioned, in this age of the coronavirus, actually works very well. What about the material that the walls are made of? Well, again, I'll show you my walls. You see, I actually got a nice window over there. These are the various guests, which are called ushpizim, who are invited to visit the sukkah. And it turns out that the sukkah, the walls of the sukkah, there are no laws about what it can be made of. As a matter of fact, it is not unusual, like at the synagogue, for one of the walls, at least, of the sukkah to be the wall of a permanent building, not canvas as are my walls, not wood as was traditional in many sukkot, but even bricks and mortar can become a wall of a sukkah, even though that is pretty permanent and the sukkah is supposed to be something that is temporary. As long as most of the sukkah is still temporary, it's still a kosher sukkah. So the walls can be really made of anything, and you can decorate them as much as you like. What really defines a sukkah, besides the 2 1/3 walls that we have, is the roof. The roof is called schach, and while it may not quite sound like it, the word schach and sukkah are from the same root. So the sukkah is really named after the roof, schach, except that the cha at the end of schach becomes another ka, so sukkah. And they are very much related to what a sukkah must be. You see, the ceiling of the sukkah has to be made out of something that grew from the ground but is no longer attached to the ground. For many, many years, the roof of my sukkah consisted of going around the property and cutting down branches and putting them on the top of the sukkah. And interestingly, different parts of the country have different traditions about what goes on that roof, what goes on the schach. For example, on the East Coast, it is very common to use pine leaves because we have pine trees, so perfectly kosher. You put pine leaves on top, a few of the needles may fall into the soup, but nevertheless, that defines what a sukkah is on the East Coast. Where I come from, the Midwest, a sukkah often has corn stalks on top. Again, they grew in the ground. They're no longer growing in the ground. You cut them off. You put them on top. I grew up with corn stalks as a part of my schach. What about the West Coast? Well, you know what grows on the West Coast. Palm trees. And so if you go to a sukkah in Los Angeles, most likely you're going to find on the roof palm trees. But I do not have palm trees. I do not have corn stalks. I do not have evergreens on my roof. What do I have? Take a look. If you can't tell what is on my roof, the answer is bamboo. Now, bamboo, it cuts some corners. It is perfectly kosher as schach, but it is known as schach lenetzach, which means schach that lasts from 1 year to the next. The reality is that when the Israelites were traveling in the desert, they put on top of their huts, the sukkot that they stayed in, they put on top temporary leaves that, as they went from one place to the next, were discarded. But ultimately, Jewish law found that bamboo, which grows in the ground, that's one criteria, which can be cut off from the ground, a second criteria, and put on top of the roof of the sukkah, that qualifies as schach for the sukkah. So that is what I use, actually, because frankly, it's a lot easier to have bamboo and roll it out every year and not have to rely each year on cutting branches and gathering them together and putting them up. I use that bamboo as my schach. So there you have it. That's what makes a kosher sukkah, one that has not 4 walls, not even 3 walls, but 2 walls and at least 1/3 of the 3rd wall, and schach that once grew in the ground, that no longer grows in the ground, and is placed on the top. And that allows us to celebrate in such a beautiful way this holiday of Sukkot. Sukkot is called Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. And what could be better than sitting in a beautiful sukkah, day or night, enjoying the outside, enjoying nature, and being thankful for all that we have. This has been 10 minutes of Sukkah, a little bit of Torah, Shabbat Shalom, and Chag Sameach.